There's a piece out today in the New York Times that I got a little bit excited about, and that's saying something because I don't normally get excited about much of anything the New York Times has to offer unless it's a Jamel Bowie article. This piece is entitled Chuck Schumer Faces Pushback from a Fight Club of Senate Democrats. Y'all know how much I despise Chuck Schumer. I've been calling for him to be removed from Senate leadership since March of this year. And in the wake of the betrayal of the 8 surrender Dems and Chuck's obvious lack of ability to lead Senate Democrats, I think it's something like a dozen members of Congress at least, and another dozen grassroots organizations, and a couple of governors are calling for Chuck Schumer to resign as Senate leader. And there is an active pressure campaign for constituents to call their Democratic senators to demand new leadership. But we hadn't heard any Democratic senators formally step forward and demand new leadership. But there's a little glimmer of hope here. So this piece that came out today talking about the fight club of Senate Dems seems to indicate that opposition amongst Senate Democrats is building, and it is building swiftly. This piece by Lisa Lehrer starts off, a group of influential liberal senators is directly challenging Chuck Schumer's approach to the midterm elections and to President Trump in another sign of growing frustration among Democrats toward the minority leader. The coalition of at least half a dozen senators who call themselves the Fight Club is unhappy with how Mr. Schumer and his fellow senator from New York, Kirsten Gillibrand, the head of the Senate Democrats' campaign arm, have chosen, recruited, and they argue favored candidates aligned with the establishment. No shit. Chuck Schumer, as you remember, would not endorse Zoran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee for the mayor of New York. Vote blue no matter who, huh? No. Only corporate establishment Democrats. That's the only folks these guys will get behind. The article continues, the mutinous mood of the senators, who include Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, Tina Smith of Minnesota, Chris Murphy of Connecticut, Bernie Sanders of Vermont, and Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, reflects the widespread doubts among the Democratic base that party leaders in Congress have a strong vision and a winning strategy for returning to power. Once again, if you're not familiar with how out of touch Chuck Schumer is, go watch John Oliver's piece entitled The Baileys. The goals and existence of the group, which had not been previously reported, were described by 9 people with direct knowledge of its deliberations. They spoke with the New York Times on condition of anonymity. With views of the Democratic brand at record lows, the group argues that the party must embrace candidates willing to challenge entrenched corporate interests, fiercely oppose the Trump regime, and defy their own party's orthodoxy. Other senators who have participated in the group's actions beyond those initial 6 that I listed have included Edward J. Markey of Massachusetts, Jeff Merkley of Oregon, that's my senator, and Martin Heinrich of New Mexico. They are focused on contested primaries for open seats in Minnesota, Michigan, and Maine. The party's campaign arm, the DSCC, has not made any formal endorsements in contested primaries. However, the senators are convinced that it is quietly signaling support for and pushing donors towards specific Senate candidates. And unsurprisingly, all of those candidates are corporate establishment Democrats. Apparently, this discord started bubbling up last month after a number of heated conversations between Democratic senators over the electoral strategy in these contested Senate seats. The piece says the Fight Club senators generally lean left of their Democratic peers in Congress, but their differences are less over ideology and more about attitude and political combativeness. They worry that leadership is using a dated playbook and risks dampening the party's energy and desire for new kinds of candidates. No shit. Alex Nguyen, a spokesman for Mr. Schumer, said our North Star is winning the Senate majority in 2026, and any decision is made to achieve that goal. Chuck Schumer is a dinosaur. He thinks that this is 1975 politics. He is playing a game with a playbook that has been outdated for a very long time. And it really sounds like there are a number of Senate Democrats who understand that. They understand that their leadership is hamstringing them and potentially risking the future of our democracy. While individual senators often endorse primary candidates, it is highly unusual for a group of sitting senators to collectively wade into contested races and back candidates who are not the preferred choice of the official party apparatus. Democratic strategist Josh Orton said, I can think of no historical example that would compare to this level of internal caucus fear and dissension. to be essentially a guerrilla group of senators who are raising concerns not just about one bill or one decision, but questions of leadership's entire disposition toward politics and the Trump regime feels unique. That was my use of regime, not his. Also, I'm not sure why he's calling them a guerrilla group of senators. If this reporting is accurate, it's 20% of the Senate Dems. And I would not be surprised if it's more than that, which is why we have to keep the pressure on. You need to keep calling your Democratic senators and tell them that Chuck Schumer has to go. Tell them what kind of party leadership you need. Let's take the Minnesota Senate race. So the Fight Club has come out in support of Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. It seems like the DSCC and Chuck Schumer are leaning toward this other candidate, Ms. Craig. This is very unique to have a block of senators come out and publicly endorse somebody in the primaries who is not the favored candidate of the establishment. Now, the Fight Club apparently does not plan to target incumbents or the two Democratic candidates widely seen as Mr. Schumer's strongest recruits. They are having their eye on the races in Texas and Iowa. Okay, skipping down quite a bit here, I recommend that you go read the whole piece, as always, understanding the obvious bias of the New York Times. Tensions over the committee's electoral strategy have been building for months. Concerns began percolating among the senators as they watched Mr. Schumer repeatedly decline to endorse Zoran Mamdani. In September, Mr. Van Hollen publicly accused Democratic leaders of playing spineless politics by staying on the sidelines of the race. Let's not forget how many Democratic establishment politicians endorsed Andrew Cuomo in the primaries, and how Chuck Schumer would not tell us who he voted for in the general election and would not endorse Zoran Mamdani even after he secured the Democratic nomination. Just a month later, Janet Mills, who is the current Democratic governor of Maine and will be 80 years old when sworn in if she is elected to the Senate, had been having meetings and negotiations with Chuck Schumer and the DSCC. They clearly are trying to put their backing behind her. This move prompted backlash from a number of senators. Bernie Sanders called the decision to recruit Mills, again, she'll be 80, quote, disappointing. He also said that the party should not waste millions of dollars on an unnecessary and divisive primary. When some in the group gathered in Mr. Sanders' office in October to film a video discussing the government shutdown, they discussed their frustrations with the committee. A few days later, they met in Mr. Van Hollen's office for the first official Fight Club meeting. I think this is a really important development. Again, if you have a Democratic senator, you need to be calling them. You need to be pushing them to join with the Fight Club. This is a group inside the Democratic caucus that is building power in the Senate. Chuck Schumer and other dinosaurs are playing by a playbook that the Republicans have shredded. They are operating out of a paradigm of decades ago. They are not equipped to meet this moment. They don't have what it takes, but they are too arrogant, too drunk on their own power to pass the torch, to step aside and let people who have the skills, the know-how, and the tenacity take the lead. Chuck Schumer is not going to let go of power willingly. He's going to have to be forced out. And here we see growing opposition amongst Senate Democrats, an appetite for new leadership, a willingness to listen to their constituents, and an understanding of what the party must do in order to play their role in saving democracy. So please, 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 if you have a Democratic senator, you need to be calling and emailing every day. Take 5 minutes, shoot off an email, make a phone call every day. Demand a vote for new leadership, whether that is Chris Van Hollen, whether that is Jeff Merkley, whether that's Chris Murphy. They need somebody new in charge, someone who understands what it is going to take and is willing to fight for us. I think what we're seeing here in this power struggle is that the Democratic Party is operating like two parties within one. We, the people, we, the constituents, can shift the power dynamic very, very effectively if we organize, if we pressure our electeds. This is a moment where we, the American people, exercise our power. We have the power here as constituents, as the American people, to shape the Democratic Party into a tool that we can wield successfully to help defend ourselves from a fascist takeover. Establishment Democrats, they have not functioned as an opposition party at all. They have failed us at every turn. As we see folks in the House and the Senate who are willing to do what it takes, who understand the assignment, are willing to listen to us, are willing to fight, we've got to support them. Now is a time for change of leadership. Can't have more of the status quo in the midterms. No, we need folks who will fight for us and fight for democracy. It seems like more senators need to get on board and join the Fight Club.